And begin.
And welcome to Behind the Funny. This is Scott Higgins.
And this is Ace Aceto.
Yes, and welcome to the
Back.
Aceman, everybody. Ace is finally back.
Man,
Missed our last episode.
it took me, I left Saratoga, New York at 3 p.m. It was telling me 3 minutes,
and
3
normally,
hours,
with no traffic,
3 hours and 9 minutes.
that's about 3
to
hour
get
trip.
home.
Yep.
And instead it took 5 because something happened on the Mass Pike. You remember the Mass Pike, Mike, right? Remember what
I
a
know
pain
all
in the
about
ass
it.
that was, right?
The pain in the ass pike. That's what
Yes.
that's what that's for, yeah.
Boy, did you hit that.
PIAP, that's what
Yeah.
local reference.
So
Live
so,
from
yeah.
the assment. Yeah.
Yes. the
Yes.
Pain in the ass man.
Oh, nice.
Listen, he's a wordsmith. We know
Yes,
that.
we're not going to
you know?
keep up with him tonight. We're not going to
No,
keep up with
look,
him.
We're gonna
I
be
didn't come
clever.
up with live from the acement. I love it.
Neither did we.
Neither did we. It was one of our
It was
guests.
one of our
that
guests.
Said that.
He said, "You know,
Ah.
you said we're going to the basement. I think you should call it the acement." I'm like, I like that.
Yeah, so we kept it. But anyway,
Yeah.
our bourbon dates. First off, Ace is drinking Suntory Japanese whiskey.
Yeah.
And I am drinking Jura, which is a mix of Irish whiskey and Scotch that is finished in bourbon barrels.
Yeah.
So,
clinkies,
Clinkies, my friend.
to you, Mike.
And Clinkies to our
Yeah.
friend Mike, Mike is not only one of my absolute favorite comedians, he is one of my favorite people on the
Yes.
planet Earth. You are generally just one of the nicest people that I've ever encountered, and I appreciate that
Yeah.
very much, Mike. So I always enjoy our conversations. I always enjoy talking with you.
I enjoy your monthly emails.
Yes.
You know, we're on your email list, and I love that.
I love your
It's
your,
very
your
positive.
newsletters and your updates and things like that, man. It's fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate you. It's always a pleasure to talk
Thank
to you and to be here and to send you newsletters.
Thank you.
Now, where did you come up with the idea for the newsletters?
That's thank you for asking. So I was the first person. Nobody was ever sending newsletters before.
Yes,
but,
that's right.
I
I've
had never
spawned-
heard of a newsletter till you sent one.
Yeah, a letter full of news is the
Right.
reason
That's
I
how
call
you
it
thought
that.
of it. Yeah.
But sincerely, there's actually the specific ones that I send originated a few years ago. Like I feel like I've always had a newsletter. Always had like a mailing list of some kind, and you send them out. You're like, hey, come to see my day. Come to my shows, and then every time you do that, like a bunch of people leave the list and like, yeah,
Right.
come see
Exactly.
a show in Massachusetts. Well, I'm in Pennsylvania, so never mind. Like, when are you
Right.
gonna come here? Last year, whatever it is.
Yeah, right.
But so part of the story is a little sad because my stepsister got cancer a few years
man.
ago and sadly died. I think it's
sorry.
now just about 2 years ago, and it may even I don't remember the specific, but it was sometime in the past few years. And when she was battling the cancer,
Mhm.
I'd asked her, is there anything that I can do? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm a comedian. And she said, I would love it if you just, sent me a joke once in a while, that would really like help lift my spirits. And so from that point, I think it was probably like another year to maybe, I forget how long it was, but for months and months and months, just every day I would just write like sort of 3 jokes specifically for her. And I would just message her those 3 jokes. And that's where that began. And then like another friend of mine went through a hard time. She I think got a relationship ended and she was sad about that. There was various people in my life experienced all these kinds of upheaval. And I just sort of started compiling them into like just a private, little list of, a dozen people here and there that eventually I would just send them like maybe once a week, just, instead, like, I think I was sending them every day. And one friend was like, this is too much. And I was like,
I want to
"You're
leave
right."
this list.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mike,
Thank you
we
for
get
caring.
it. You're
Yeah.
funny. Move on.
Right.
Get a hobby.
You like me. Yeah.
You
I
really
was like,
like me.
thought it'd be good. But
Take up candle making or something, Mike. My God.
So I started just, again, it was just an informal thing about once a week. I would send just, a few fun, warm thoughts, like
Mhm.
funny, silly little things. And then I learned about Substack, which is where I, put out my newsletters.
Mhm.
And I was like, this seems like it'd be good. And instead of just sending out, where my shows are,
Yeah.
I'm sending out, like there's a couple different lists that I have. One is, for people who want to follow my comedy,
Mhm.
and every, week or sometimes every couple weeks, I don't send them all the time. Like whenever I have things to say or things
Mhm.
to share, or like things I want people to know about, at least I'd say a few times a month, I'll send out a free message that has a few jokes in it. And then sometimes longer things, sometimes, advice that people ask for, sometimes like some
Mhm.
memories about my grandmother who died a couple of years ago.
Right,
But
right.
it all grew out of the idea that I would just like, how about just 3 jokes a week, and
Mhm.
then some thoughts about those jokes. And then separately, I was also sending messages to friends, kind of like, at the new year, or like, the holiday season at the end of the year. And then a couple of
Right.
years ago, I decided like, why not once a month? Why not once a month try to keep up with people? So I started a separate mailing list that's just called Happy New Month. And so
Yes.
every
That's
month
what
on the
we're
first of
on.
the month, I send out a message that is at like so far, and I try to and plan to keep it like plug free. Like it's not about,
Mhm.
come see shows or buy things.
Right,
It's just
right.
Yeah.
like, a message to be like celebrating, hey, look, we celebrate Happy New Year. Why do months get less impact than the year? Because they're more
Right.
frequent. That I guess makes sense. But yeah, so it's just like, a little fun challenge every month to be like, what am I grateful for? What am I excited about? What do
Mhm.
I want to celebrate at the beginning of this month? What's going on in my life? What's going on in the world in the calendar year?
Mhm.
And so yeah, that's where it all stems from.
Started.
Well,
That's
that's what I
awesome.
like about it, too, is because a lot of newsletters tend to be, hey, I'm going to be here this month. Last month I was here. I had a good time with this. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
That's fine. It kind of keeps people up to date with
What are you
what they're
saying? You don't
doing.
like my newsletter?
You're. I blocked you a long time ago, buddy.
I blocked myself. I
I
stopped doing
see
them.
you every week.
I know.
You tell me where you're going to be. I don't need
I
your
know.
friggin' newsletter. No,
Anyway.
but you tell these, sometimes they're jokes, they're quips,
Yeah.
they're stories, and sometimes you tell these personal things, like you said, memories about your grandmother,
Mhm.
or different things like that. And it keeps it interesting. It keeps it fresh, because I'll see the email, I'm like, all right, what is Myq going to talk about this week?
Right.
Because it's not the same thing every time.
Mhm.
So it keeps it interesting, and that's what I like about it. It's a little different than the normal newsletter
And
format that
well,
we tend to see.
and to your point earlier, it's also he's showing his appreciation for the people.
Yes.
Like you
Yeah.
genuinely feel when I'm reading the newsletter, I feel as if you only sent it to me.
Yes.
Like, hey Ace, I really appreciate you. Blah, and then
Yeah.
so it's just who you are, man. You're a good guy.
I thank you. I also, if people do write back to them, which they
Mhm.
can and sometimes do, like definitely, I'm always happy to hear individual things from individual people. And as long as I have, the time and, bandwidth, like if you wrote back, then I would send you a personal message. And I'm always happy to
Right.
catch up. I heard a story that Mark Maron told once about like somebody commented maybe something. I don't know if he was a fan, or maybe it was like negative, and Mark responded. I think it was
Mhm.
negative, and Mark responded, and they kept going back and forth for a while until the other guy was like, "Hey man, can you leave me alone?" And
I think I heard him talk
And
about
you know
that.
what? That
I
makes
think
perfect sense
yeah,
with Mark.
yeah, right. Yeah.
and so I feel like, I also have a high level of, capacity
Mhm.
and bandwidth for like communication. Like I
Engaging.
mean,
Right.
yeah, I love, especially like you're my friends. Like I love talking
Right.
to you. If people are fans of my comedy and they comment with nice things online, my goal is to always, respond positively, because without fans, without people who took in
Sure.
my comedy, I
Right.
wouldn't be able to have the life that I'm grateful for doing.
Yeah.
And it might even get to a point where it only like once or twice have there been people that are like, I will respond more than you will. And I was like, we'll see about that.
Challenge
But
accepted. Yeah. You don't realize how much free time I have, buddy.
He's like, you bet.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Now,
awesome.
have you had interactions like that with somebody that just,
Was negative?
yeah, they're not a fan and they're kind of challenging you a little bit?
So I consider myself, I don't know if I've told you this, but I consider myself a recovering argumentaholic.
Really?
And by
I
which
don't- yeah, I don't see
I
that.
don't see
I don't
him
see
being
that at all.
argumentative.
well, listen, you guys, here's why you're wrong about that.
Okay.
Because
I disagree.
You're totally wrong.
sincerely. So, I've been on Facebook, let's say, since the 2000 somethings, right?
2009
And
or yeah.
yeah, and I think even maybe before that, like when I was just in school, it was
Oh, yeah.
originally only for if you were in school.
Right.
But, after I was on TV a few times and after I started, having like more visibility publicly, I remember, sometimes I would post, sometimes you post something, nobody responds. Sometimes you post something and it goes some level of viral, right? Sometimes hundreds, thousands, potentially hundreds, who knows how
Right,
many people.
right.
And, the more, the way that the algorithm works these days and perhaps the whole time, like the more controversial a thing you say, or if you say something that, if it's about an issue in social justice, if it's,
Yeah.
about the Second Amendment, like I feel
Yeah.
like I posted something recently and just that, it's sticky and a
Right.
lot of people, the algorithm shows it to people who aren't my fans, who don't
Right,
agree with
exactly.
me. And
Yeah.
and so it gets a lot, people are like, it's sort of like, how like the Comedy Central roasts always used to be like a bunch of famous people who weren't even necessarily comedians, but then, some really good comedians that nobody had heard of yet, like Amy Schumer or Anthony
Yes.
Right.
Jeselnik before, or Nikki
Right.
Glazer, before they
Right.
had, like, that was like their first big thing.
Mhm.
And so frequently on those shows, the famous people who weren't comedians, who weren't, writing their own jokes,
Right.
would say to the really funny, talented comedians who, quote, no one had heard of, they'd be like, who even are you? Like, what are you even
Right.
doing here? And like the answer to that is, well, they're there because literally because they're funny. The only reason they're there is because they're funny. And so similarly, when I would post something that would get seen by people who don't know who I am, and they're like, kind of the same thing, like, who even are you? Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you're only seeing this because of like either the quality or the caliber of it, or just the fact because a lot of people are sharing it, because a lot of
Right.
people are talking about it. Because I'm not saying it necessarily means that because a lot of people are talking about something, it means it's quality. But this is all to
Right.
say, over the past decades, or at least decade and a half, I have experienced a lot of people disagreeing with me, vocally or in
Yeah.
writing. And I used to respond to everyone ad nauseum, just
Yep.
repeatedly. Like, and every once in a while, like there would come a point after going back and forth with somebody that they'd be like, I actually do see what you're saying. And I would honestly like always be open to like, I don't know everything.
Right.
Like if
right.
you have
Of course.
if you have data, if you have facts, if you have
Right.
information about something that I don't know, I don't want to just be, concretely married to, the same thing that I've always thought since I was,
Yeah.
a baby. But now my policy is, I do respond to, if somebody's like hateful, then I'll block them. If somebody's just
Right.
disagrees in a way that
Argumentative.
yeah, could be, I'll give them a chance to be respectful. I'll give them a chance to be a human being and discuss things in good faith. And if they, don't take that chance to heart, then I will stop responding to them and stop. Do you guys know about the two wolves that are inside all of us, according to a Native American story?
No, I haven't
that
heard that.
Oh, it's a really beautiful thing that I'm told comes from like a Native American like grandfather is
Folklore.
talking to a grandparent's talking to a grandchild and saying like in each of us there are two wolves, and one wolf represents all of the positive qualities that you would want, the love and compassion and kindness and togetherness and communion and forgiveness, and the other wolf represents all the negative things, fear and doubt and insecurity and hatred and anger, and that these wolves are constantly, at odds with one another. They're constantly battling. And the grandchild asks, which wolf wins? And the answer is whichever one you feed. And so I feel like there, online, I was certainly feeding the wolves of scarcity, the wolves of disagreement, the wolves of discord. And it's not to say that you should only talk to people that you agree with, but you can only try to talk to people who, whether you agree with them or not, believe that, in being a human being and civil and respectful, and be like, oh yeah, you think this, I think that. Like, I think ultimately we all want basically the same thing, which is, to be to increase our happiness and decrease our suffering. And then if we can do that for ourselves and our families and our friends and our society and, our whatever groups we're a part of, and then expand that group outer and outer and outer. Like, so the more that you have, then the more you can hopefully help and offer help to other people. Like, all things being equal, why wouldn't most reasonable people want everyone to be able to live, joyfully and peacefully and with as little suffering and as much happiness as possible?
Makes perfect sense.
It makes sense, but if you look online, like I've seen people like you, what you're talking about, like argumentative, they have to come into a thread and just say something shitty. But then you go to their profile and it's like, peace and love and, I just want everyone to be happy. But you're a dick online. Like
their comments on other
stuff.
People's posts is horrible, but their actual homepage is exactly what you said.
All while you were talking about that, I wanted to tell you, if you ever want to get triggered and feed your negative wolf, go on the this is where I can't help it. And I'm like you.
Ace is actually one of the more positive people.
Yeah.
He's actually helped me out because I feed into negativity a lot of times. Unfortunately, it's a bad trait that I have, and I've actually gotten better over the years. I've learned to kind of put that stuff aside and just focus on the positives. And Ace has helped me a lot with that. But
I can't help it though. So I think I joined the group, the Flat Earth Society.
Yes.
And you knew I was going there, right?
I knew you were going to bring that up.
I am amazed at the stupidity in this world. It's not even just this country. There's people from Great Britain that believe it's flat. I'm like, get on an airplane. Like, and all I do now, Myq, is I have these few memes. One of them is, just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's not true, or just because you can't grasp the concept. There's another one about conspiracy theorists and how it feeds their ego. That's why they feel as if they know something that no one else knows. Like they're enlightened and everyone else is sheep and they follow the thing and it's like, and I just go on this Flat Earth thing and I just drop in, post one of these memes, and I get the notifications, so and so reacted to your post, and it's flat earthers with the mad emoji
I'll show up on Thursday night and he goes, you should see what this guy just posted to my meme.
And it's amazing because I'm just like seriously, take a 5th grade science class. You know what I mean? It's like
See, and the way I'm wired, I'm wired, I have to stay away from that stuff because I go down the rabbit hole with these people.
I don't. I'll just ignore them, and that pisses them off even more.
He can post it just to kind of poke the bear. I can't. I go down the rabbit hole with them and argue with them, so I just leave it alone.
And that's really dangerous to go down the rabbit hole because if the Earth is flat, then you just fall out the other side immediately.
Right? Right.
And
that's what's happened.
And so what you're saying, guys, is that you believe the Earth is round. Okay, well, we can agree to disagree. And no. I'm
argumentative. Myq is coming out.
The moon landing was fake.
Oh yeah.
Let's get into all of it.
I'm a flat mooner. Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, yeah. Everyone knows it's just a pita
We all
bread.
know the moon is flat. Of course.
Yeah, of course.
You just ruined half of my material.
The funny thing is, I actually watched a video last night on YouTube. I watched a video and they talked about, because you know how they say the moon landing was staged and all that shit.
Yeah, Stanley Kubrick filmed.
Yeah. No. You know what happened? They practiced the moon landing in the desert. And they asked Stanley Kubrick. This is for real.
Well,
this
that's
is
how
what
he got
NASA
all his
said
information for
2001.
2001: A
No,
Space Odyssey.
but this is what some of the folks from NASA said. They said, no, we practiced the moon landing in the desert, and we had Stanley Kubrick actually film it, and they couldn't pay him, so they paid him in lenses.
Ha.
And so the lenses that were used were like, NASA grade lenses or whatever. But it's like, no, they practiced it. So typical to a conspiracy theorist,
No,
they take
Ace.
one little kernel of truth
No.
and then build a story around it.
That's the story they told you, and you're choosing to believe it.
yeah.
That's the cover up, and you're choosing to believe it.
All right. Why don't
I love
walk
you guys.
off the edge of the
and
earth?
I think it's very valuable that the like what you're both saying, Ace, that you I feel like maybe you would call it a guilty pleasure, some might
Yeah.
say. Like, I actually don't love that framing, because like, look, it brings you pleasure if you enjoy doing it, and if you're Scott, you recognize that you would go
You
too
can't.
deep into it and it would be unhealthy. Like, it's good for us to all have things that bring us joy or help us kick back or relax. Like, for me, I feel like I get my I call them sometimes like judgment traps,
Mhm.
like that if I I who among us, like I've certainly felt like, oh, you see somebody else doing something that, or not knowing something, or doing something differently than you would or think is good or healthy or right or the best, and be like, oh, I think my way is good. There's so many ways that
Right.
are absolutely fine, and my way is not necessarily better.
Right.
But I love reading advice columns, like, and listening to advice
Oh, yeah.
podcasts. Like, that's one of my favorite things, is for people to be like, hey, I need help, and for somebody else to be like, here's how I can help you. Like, I don't know,
Right.
and here's this person's offering of an answer. Though sometimes one of my favorite ways that it can go is the person writing in doesn't realize that they are the villain of the story. And
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're like, and then the advice columnist is going, "You are absolutely wrong."
oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's so cathartic and rewarding. I actually have stopped reading this one regularly, but there is an advice column called "Here's That Bad Advice You Were Looking For," I think is the name.
Really?
And they go around, and they either people send them to them, or they like curate from other advice columns, like from Dear Abby or Ann
They'll
Landers
pull-
or Dear
yeah.
Prudence. Yeah, they'll find ones where people are the villain, and they're like, shouldn't somebody else do something and not me fix myself? And and this "Here's That Bad Advice You Were Looking For" person will respond in sort of a
The
super
worst
funny, over the
advice.
top way
Right.
that makes me slide too far in the Scott Higgins direction, but to remain in the Ace Aceto, to remain in the Ace mint. I don't want to go to the Scott mint.
No, you don't.
No one
No,
does.
you
Trust
don't.
me, it's very dark.
Because I
and-
feel the
down
need
there.
to get them to realize
How stupid they are.
yes, how stupid they are. And I keep
Oh, yeah.
arguing, and eventually you have to realize you're not going to convince them.
No. So it's
And-
more. It's
and I
more fun
can't-
to make fun of them.
But I can't give up on it. I'm like, why don't they see this?
'Cause
And-
they're dumb.
And,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
just keep going, and eventually I'm halfway to the center of the earth, and I don't realize I
Well, there
dug
is no
that
center. It's
far.
flat.
Yeah,
Right.
ha, ha, ha.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
it's-
you
Yeah, that's the argument I'm making. That's the argument I'm
Yeah.
making.
It's
Yeah.
it's crazy.
I always wonder how far down do they think it goes? I mean, they must like, because
Oh.
you can dig pretty far.
Yeah.
But
By the
think
way,
about
I
this-
like how
yeah.
you. I like how during the. I don't know if you caught it, but when he started talking about the different advice columns, he said, "Dear Abby, Dear Anne, Dear Prudence," which is a Beatles song.
I
know.
Totally
I know.
not. Yeah. I'm
Oh,
like,
that-
I don't
that's-
believe I've heard of Dear Prudence advice column.
I was, and the sad part is I Googled it as he said it.
Did you really?
Well, you guys, I appreciate you. I am funny. That would have made a perfect joke. It is
was a great
also an
joke.
advice column. There
Is it
a
really?
real, yes.
Oh,
Dear
shit.
Prudence is in Slate. Like I almost I mean, I almost didn't want to tell you, but I value the truth and I value friendship. And I assume that one of your listeners might have let you know at some point. And so I'd rather have this experience
Get it out in the
now,
open
but
now.
yeah.
That was, but I thought totally that was because that's the type of joke you would do, man. That's totally him.
You're absolutely right.
He posted one earlier today that made me literally laugh out loud. He mentioned All in the Family. He goes, that show could never be made today because a lot of the
everyone's
actors are dead.
Yeah.
I read that and I just started laughing.
That's funny. That's funny
Oh,
because
yeah.
you took something that everyone always says and then took it in a
I
completely
just had
different
that
direction.
conversation 2 days ago about shows that could not be made nowadays.
Right.
And
But he took it in a different. It's misdirection, right?
I appreciate it. I think that, I mean, I know why it's sort of in the conversation this week, in part because Seinfeld has been doing a lot of interviews because he has a new movie coming out, the Pop-Tart movie. And there's so many funny
People
posts on social media, like making fun of, like, look, Seinfeld is funny. I've loved Seinfeld. The show is funny. Seinfeld's comedy is funny. Seinfeld, but he is he is for me a judgment trap of a kind because he is also, you know, a 70-year-old billionaire, straight white man who has made, you know, he won show business. He won capitalism. And now he's, you know, the most recent thing he says is like, and this is why you can't make quality sitcoms today. And then I was like, I've watched a lot of quality sitcoms recently and just like went through and I'm like, oh yeah, there's so many that are today. Like a friend of mine was like, yeah, even, you know, ones like Curb and It's Always Sunny, those started decades ago. I'm like, those aren't the only ones either.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but I think a lot of quality sitcoms today tend to be on, you know, like you said, Curb, that's on HBO.
HBO, absolutely. That's true.
You know, back in the day, you know, your joke was on All in the Family. That was on CBS. That was network television.
Right.
You don't see quality sitcoms on network television anymore. Because,
and I think,
or they're not given a chance.
Right. They're
That's,
really
I
not
think
given
that
a chance.
is
Because if you think back, and everyone knows, like the first season of Seinfeld, it didn't do well. It didn't test well. They had to change the time slot.
No.
They had to change the format.
Yeah.
You know, they brought in Elaine. Elaine wasn't part of it. They were going to make the waitress at the you know, restaurant or the diner more of the female character. So it took time to develop that, and I don't think sitcoms today get a chance to develop if they don't do well in that first season.
No,
You know?
in fact, I read a thing, and I don't know the exact, you know, legality of the contracts and such, but that on streaming, even, you know, where a lot of shows are taking place, I think a lot of shows don't get more than 2 seasons because I think if they get a 3rd season, that kicks them into like a higher level of royalties that have to be paid, I think, to the writers, to the creators, to the actors. So they're like, just give us 2 seasons, like 2 and out. And yes, I mean, there's so many factors that are in play now. So yeah, of course, there's a lot of wonderful shows being made on, I mean, in the 80s and the 70s, there were only like, you know, 3 basic channels. And now it's a cornucopia. It's
well,
incredible.
And HBO, when it first started as home box office, it was just movies. There weren't TV shows on there unless it was a comedy special.
They
or
did
something,
their comedy because
you know?
What's his name? Did the very first comedy special on that
Carlin
channel. No, Carlin didn't do it.
Was it Richard
Robert
Jenney?
Klein?
Robert Klein?
Robert Klein.
Robert Klein.
Robert Klein did
good
the
work.
very first comedy special ever on HBO. I think it was 1975 or 76. He did the very first special ever.
So
And you could never do Robert Klein having the very first special on HBO again because HBO's
he's dead.
been around. Yeah.
Is he dead? He's dead,
No,
right?
I don't
Robert
think
Klein
I don't-
is still
Oh no,
alive.
Robert Klein is. I'm thinking of
Pat McLeod just went and met him.
That's right. No, stop.
Can I tell you guys?
Yes.
Guys, I love Pat McLeod.
You do.
Like, let me tell you, so my experience with him, I actually did a show with him last year and hadn't seen him in probably 15 years.
Yeah.
And he looks the same. I don't know what
Yes.
deal
He
made with
drank
the devil.
vampire blood or something.
Right.
'Cause he does not age.
But yeah, he was, I met him in the, mid to late, like 2000 somethings,
Yeah.
and, 2006, 7, around there. And he was, a baby and a baby in a Carson suit. And
Yes.
I mean, Micah Sherman and I hosted every Thursday night at the Comedy Studio from like
Yep.
2007,
Yep.
2008.
Yep.
And we just invited him as often as we could. Just like he is a character in real life.
Yes.
And I mean, I truly don't think, an audience who doesn't know him personally off stage can
Yeah.
really appreciate everything that he is and brings to the table.
Oh, and
because
I bring him up, Mike, not to interrupt you, because there is
Please.
nobody in Boston or New England area that's a bigger fan of comedy than Pat McLeod.
Right.
That guy goes out and supports every major comedy show. He goes out and meets every major comedian that comes through the area.
Right.
He has pictures with every major comedian.
100%. If you're a
yeah.
comedian and if you've been on Rogan, okay. If you've been on the
Absolutely.
Tonight Show, okay. If you've been on, a Comedy Central half hour, if you had a Netflix special, but if you don't have a photo with Pat McLeod, have you really made it?
You're no one.
That's perfectly said. I said that all the
it.
time. If you have done anything in New England and you don't have a picture with Pat McLeod, do you even exist?
We've actually thought so. So some friends of ours do a podcast out in Ohio called the Mixtape Podcast. It's all about 80s
Great
and
podcast.
90s and
Great
stuff like that. And shout out to the Mixtape Boys. But they, on their show, they started asking this question if anyone had ever had an experience with Weird Al, and then somehow it started an experience with David Byrne from Talking Heads. And they just asked people, and they were amazed at how many people say, "Oh yeah, I met Weird Al, and this is the story."
I met David Byrne.
So we joked about starting to ask people, "Have you ever met Pat McLeod?" Because what's funny is most comics, like especially local, people, they're like, "Who the fuck is Pat McLeod? What are you talking about?"
What's amazing is local comics that work in New England. A lot of them are like, "Who's Pat McLeod?" But you talk to national people,
and
that
they're
come
like,
through,
"Oh
they're
yeah, I
like,
got a picture
"Oh,
with
yeah,
that guy."
that guy, I think he took a picture with me. They all know him. I mean, he literally supports everybody.
Yeah.
Which I got to give the guy credit for,
Right.
because man, he comes out for everything. He is so passionate.
But I've never
about
seen him on
stand-up.
stage. I don't know how he is.
I
on
work.
stage.
I only worked with him once.
Yeah.
Our friend Tom Stewart,
Had him
very
on.
very good friend of the podcast. I did a show for Tom, and Pat McLeod was on it. We did the show together. Other than that, I haven't had the chance to work with Pat.
him.
But
yeah.
I mean, the guy flew to Texas to support Lenny Clark when Lenny
In
was
Austin.
doing shows at Joe
Rogan's
Rogan's
place. Yeah.
Comedy Mothership.
That's crazy.
Because the guy just loves stand-up so much. His passion for stand-up literally is second to none.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, I'm so happy to be talking about him. I'm like, I gotta get Pat on my podcast.
Yeah.
And
You should, and by the way, we should mention for our listeners,
Yes.
you've got to check out Mike's
podcast. Yeah.
I had the pleasure of being on it. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, and Ace,
for having me.
I'll get you on before Pat McLeod.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Now I know I'm going places.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is such a huge compliment. but broccoli and ice cream,
Yes.
it's such a great conversation.
Yeah.
You go from one side to the other. You got to check it out, because Mike has a great way of just really kind of getting to know his guests when you're on there.
Yeah.
and it's a really
Oh, I'd
interesting
love to.
podcast.
I'd love to.
And
Yes.
I love it. It's one of my regular go-tos when I'm on the road to
Oh,
listen to and
that's-
everything. So
That's so thoughtful. Thank you. It really means a lot when a comedian. I mean, it means a lot when anyone listens
Right.
to
But
my
especially
podcast.
comedians. Yeah.
But yeah, a comedian, because we do podcasts. We're talking to comedians all the time. We're listening to comedians all the time. You might want to turn off or like listen to music or
Right.
listen to a non-comedy. There's so many podcasts out there.
There are.
So it's
Right.
There
an
are.
honor.
Yeah.
No,
well,
but
and-
you take it in a different direction. You ask people about, what kind of, brings them joy in their life personally and everything. So
But-
it's a different direction than the standard stuff that we talk about. So it's interesting.
But
it's really interesting.
I agree with you that when a comedian says, I listen all the time, it's like, oh, wow. Yeah. Like when we went to Boston for the Boston Comedy Choice Awards and we saw Kathy Farris, who
Yes.
I still need to get on here because I've been saying I want to get her on. And she was like, I listen to it all the time. And someone just reached out and said that they listen.
Derek Furtado.
Oh, Derek Furtado said he
I had him
listens all
on
the
one of my
time.
shows
Yeah.
last weekend, and he said he listens all the time, which sometimes you think, are they just being nice? But then he started describing specific
Different
things
guests
from
and
episodes,
stuff.
I'm like,
Yeah.
holy crap, he really listens to episodes.
Right.
Which was such a huge compliment.
Now,
Oh,
you brought
yeah.
up you brought up earlier the comedy studio and stuff. Now, they closed for a while and they're opening back up. I don't know if you knew that.
I did, in fact, their most recent email. If you open it up, you'll see my picture in it because I'm going
awesome.
to be returning to it. I think Wednesday, if it's June 26th, if that's
Oh,
a
that's
Wednesday,
awesome.
it's
we
give or
should go.
take whatever day of Wednesday of that week it is. I'm going to be coming up. I think they're going to have, hopefully touring headliners or like people doing longer sets, on Wednesdays or Thursdays. So I'm going to be maybe
Oh.
the pilot program of that.
awesome. Nice.
So yeah, the
We
studio
actually-
is where
We
I
had
started.
Rick on the
Couple
podcast
of years ago.
and he was fantastic.
And I reached out to
Conversation.
him a couple of months ago when I knew that they were going to be moving to a different space and reopening. And he said, yeah, let's do something as it gets closer. So I got to reach back out to him.
Yeah,
to get him on
we
again.
told him once it reopens, we'll come up there.
Yeah.
and we'll do a podcast from the actual
From the
new
studio.
space
Amazing.
and everything. So maybe we can coordinate something so we
I
can
am
come up
away
and see
that
you
week, but-
see you live, Mike.
That'd be great.
You
Of
can
course
go.
you're away. You take a vacation once a
No, it's fucking work.
Holy shit!
Listen, my job is slowly killing me, and it's not slowly.
Well, at
It's
least you have a job.
5 hours of that's true. 5 hours of traffic today. I am going to be in Jacksonville, Florida for a conference on that week. But you can go.
I'm gonna
and
go.
Go talk to Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go
I'm
hang
sorry,
out.
I'll miss it.
Oh, I love him. Like, oh man, you should come and see me. Sorry, did I even say when it was? Yeah, I'm gonna be out of town anyway. But
it is the 26th.
yeah.
Yeah,
It is-
no-
and that is the Wednesday.
I just
looked.
I just want to say out loud. Ace said he can't be there. I will try to be there because I am
Yeah.
available that night.
All right. Well,
I-
that's great. And
it-
bring the podcast equipment, and maybe you won't mute the guest for a full half hour,
All right, that's a
like
whole
he
nother
did
thing.
last show.
But
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
But I had Mike at my Bradley Theater, and
Yeah.
we had a blast. We
That's
hung out
awesome.
afterwards,
True.
and Peter Lou
Mm.
and Mike
yeah.
and myself, we hung out
So fun.
afterwards. We had a great
Yeah.
conversation. And
guys-
we had
Can
so
I say
much
something
fun.
also?
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you. I mean, I
No,
do.
go
but-
ahead.
All I want to do is interrupt you.
And argue.
When you were talking about when a comedian says, I listen to your podcast all the time, a person could just be saying that. It's a nice thing
Right.
to say. Somebody gets off stage, you're like, good set. And then a
Right.
funny thing to do, like, I don't recommend doing this, but the next time somebody says to you, I love your podcast, I listen all the time, just immediately, no pause, be like, what's your favorite moment?
Favorite
of the
episode?
mo-
Yeah,
yeah, what's
right.
your tell me
Who's your
tell me
favorite guest?
anything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
name 3 of our
Sing-
guests.
No,
Name
sing
one
the,
guest.
Sing the theme song for me. No, it's all instrumental.
we talked about like this happened to me once at City Steam in Hartford. People were leaving, we're hanging out in the hallway saying thank you for coming, and this one group of people, they came out and they look at me. I was headlining and they're like, oh man, you were so funny. I'm like, thank you so much. They look at the feature act, they're like, you were hilarious, man, you really were great. And he's like, thank you so much. And then they look at the host and they go, you too.
That's the worst when you're in
That
the line of
is
comics and you get the
so-
you too.
Oh my
yeah.
God. You too
Not
is
good.
the worst thing you could say in that moment.
Can I tell you, I did a show I think Phoebe Robinson and I were on a show together. Phoebe is super funny and super successful, and deservedly so.
Yeah.
And we were on a show in New York, and there was a woman who came up to, I think it might not even be the show is over, but our sets are over. We're out in like the main like lobby of the club, and this woman comes out, and I hear, across the room, I'm not right there. She said, and so this is nice. She's a nice audience member, and she's like, "You were the bomb, sis. Oh my God, you were the bomb." And then she doesn't see me there. It's totally fine. And then like a little later, that same audience member is like walking past me, and she says, "I really enjoyed hearing you." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Thank you."
So your ears work.
I
Thank
enjoyed
you.
hearing you.
It was pleasant. Yeah.
Yes.
So you know how to receive an audible.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It was a pleasure hearing you.
It's so weird sometimes what people think are a compliment.
Yeah, right.
And we've all received that once or twice.
Oh yeah.
before.
Oh yeah. You too.
Oh, one of my favorites. I wanna advocate out there. Anyone, if you like a comedian at all,
I love the
if
word
you
advocate,
enjoy their
by the
set
way.
at all, just don't say that was pretty good, pretty funny, pretty. You ever get that was pretty good? Like, and I get it that they're like, maybe they didn't think it would be good at all. Maybe they were
right. Maybe they were
surprised
surprised it was good.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow, that was actually pretty good.
Although,
well,
here's how I would take it as a compliment. If someone said, "That was pretty good," that's a callback to
100%.
Curb.
I actually heard somebody tell a comedian one time, that wasn't bad.
That wasn't bad. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah,
what,
you know
man,
what I say?
you surprised me. That wasn't as bad as I thought.
Yeah,
it was gonna
right.
be.
You didn't
I
suck
thought
as
this
bad
was
as
all
I
gonna
thought
be
you were going to
shit,
suck. Yeah.
But you
Yeah,
weren't bad.
Based on everything that I knew about you, which was nothing, based
Yeah, right.
on my looking at your face, based on my learning what your voice sounded like and what your background is, based on everything everywhere,
Everything,
it added up to it was okay. It's
Pretty
okay.
good.
Yeah. Wasn't a
I always
total
like
waste.
to say,
Wasn't a total waste.
yeah. I don't, you see a bad movie, you're like, I want those 2 hours back. These ones,
Right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't need them back. I'm fine.
I only need
Yeah.
a half hour of it back.
Keep
You were
them.
pretty good.
Yeah. If you could give me a half hour back, that'd be great. That'd be great.
I've had worse times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't
Pretty
the
good
worst time
compliment.
I've ever had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't the worst. Like the ingrown toenail I had for a month, and the infection and the staph infection.
It's not
that
like
it
when I
turned
had
into.
my tumor removed.
Yeah.
Can I use that as a blurb? That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can I have that as a blurb
As a
for my next
blurb.
special?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for his next
Better than a
newsletter.
toenail tumor. Yeah.
That was better than my ingrown toenail.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's crazy the things that and we mentioned it in an earlier podcast we did that this is the only art form where you get that immediate feedback.
Right.
Like when Kevin Bacon played a pedophile in a movie, people didn't immediately try to cancel him or tell him how terrible that was or that was horrible. But if I stand on stage and do a pedophile joke, they'll immediately tell me
turn
that
on
they
you.
didn't like that joke or that was terrible or you shouldn't talk about that.
Yeah.
This is the only art form where that happens. A band could do a song about being a pedophile and they don't immediately get that same
Right.
we want to cancel you, that's terrible, that comedians get. I don't know why we get such a visceral reaction from the crowd. Like
I have a theory.
Nobody else has. But please, I knew you would. That's why I bring this up.
Yeah.
You got it. Well, okay, so let me start like this. There's a book I read called, I believe it's called The Honest Truth About Dishonesty by a social scientist named Dan Ariely. Great book. And there's a part of it where it talks about cheating in golf and how much people do it and how much people think other people do it, which, spoiler alert, people think other people do it more than they do it. But most people are like, I don't do it, but I think a lot of other people do it.
Yeah.
And
Was this about
when
Trump?
Not yet, but so
Come on, listen, I'm the best golfer, absolutely. I am not, and this is, listen, it's not just me saying it.
This is the
okay?
only reason I did that, Mike.
This
That's
is the only,
reason I did
listen,
that.
it's not just me saying it. Everyone around me says that I'm the best golfer. I hit a 69 the other day. It was on 9 holes, but it was a 69.
Oh, I don't know anything about golf, and that
When I
makes sense.
golfed with
Okay, so
Stormy Daniels.
so in this, there's a study that they did, and that he was talking about in the book, where people are asked, like, how often would you, like, if your ball landed somewhere bad, how would you pick it up and move it better, like just a little bit? And most people are like, no, of course not. Then some people are like, what about, would you, like, what if you accidentally nudged your foot, and you nudge the ball with your foot? Would you? And if more people would say they would do that, then would pick it up and move it. And then they said, what about the club? What about more people? And more people would accidentally, quote unquote, accidentally move the ball with their club, then their foot, then picking it up. And the theory was, if I remember correctly, that the farther you get from your body,
Exactly.
like the less responsibility you feel. Like, I'm not gonna pick it up and move it. That would be the worst cheating.
But
you
if
could
my
do.
club happened to hit it, then I'm going to
My
hit it
club-
from where it is. Right.
Am I in control of my club? Like, not hardly all the time. Anyway, so I honestly think that, like, different art forms outside of comedy, like comedy is the closest to, for many comedians. Like, you could do a character and it's not who you are and what you believe. You could tell jokes that are exaggerations or nothing, but all of us here, I've seen you on stage. We are, many comedians are as close to who they are as any art form gets. Like, musicians can, but there's an instrument in the way. There's other people in the band. There's plausible deniability. Kevin Bacon's in a movie. That's not Kevin Bacon. Nobody sees an actor.
Someone else
playing
wrote
a
the script.
pedophile.
Right. They see the character.
Or
They see the
like you
character.
said, the bass player in the band didn't write the song. He's just playing the bass on it. So he may not believe in what the song is saying. Right.
And so that's why if Kevin Bacon plays a pedophile, nobody's like, well, he's probably a pedophile. But if you, Scott Higgins, tell a joke about being a pedophile, then people are like, well, that's probably, why is he even talking about it? Probably. I mean, simplest Occam's razor, simplest explanation.
No, that makes sense.
Must be.
That makes sense because, and I think most of my material is pretty middle of the road. I don't think I really put people in too much of an uncomfortable area. Sometimes it's a little suggestive, but not too bad. But I have one joke, and we've talked about it on the podcast before, that I had to stop doing. Because I wasn't, some comedians will say, you do what you do.
It's your art form.
It's your art form. Screw it. If they don't understand it, you stand by it. But I'm not willing to push the envelope over one joke.
Right.
So I just stopped doing it because people really were not understanding the joke because they heard a word
and were triggered by the
and
word.
were triggered by the word.
Took it out of context.
And didn't hear the rest of the joke and took it out of context. So I just stopped altogether. So that's why I bring that up when I say that, because it's like I don't think about that when I think of a new joke. This past week I wrote 2 new jokes, and I don't sit there and think, oh my God, how's the crowd going to respond to that? I just come up with the idea. I think it's funny. I'm going to do it. But at the same time, we're kind of in a world where, that could happen.
Here's 2 things I want to say. Number 1, just to button up from earlier, like, of course, as a comedian, like I said, Scott, you tell jokes about your life. So people are like, well, that's true. Ace, you do a wonderful Donald Trump impression. I think that you are Donald Trump. So obviously that's that. That's that. Number 2.
Easy, Ray Romano.
Oh, Jesus, stop it. You're embarrassing me now. Cut it out.
Norm MacDonald, you don't need to appear tonight.
Hey, the thing about that guy is Scott Higgins, he's gay. He's baiting me. I'm sorry. He's a masturbator.
Wow.
All right. No, go ahead, Mike. Finish your third point.
No, thank you. This is my 7th idea. And, 48 things first. Scott, I want to offer an idea for you that's going to seem
Please.
sincere, but I want to assure you it's a joke. But if it works for you, yeah. Have you considered, instead of, taking that joke out of retirement, saying, I understand you stopped doing it because people weren't understanding. They weren't getting where you were coming from. They were not listening to the whole thing. But have you thought about introducing the joke by saying, now look, everyone, this next joke I stopped doing because audiences didn't understand it, because audiences were too uncool, because audiences were too foolish. They were too reactionary. But you're not like that, audience, right? You're not like that. Anyway, I'm a pedophile, whatever it is.
Different way to present it.
Seriously,
totally different way to present it.
It's just like I have a joke that's a dirtier joke, and you know me. Most of my stuff is growing up Catholic and being Catholic and going to Catholic school, so I had a lot of clean stuff for a long time, and then I wrote this pretty dirty joke. I lie to audiences. I say, look, this next joke, there's a clean version and a dirty version. Which one do you guys want? No one ever says clean. And if there's one or two people that say clean, the rest of the audience is yelling dirty. So I take myself off the hook by saying
that's a great psychology trick to the audience, because once they give you permission, you can do the
then
dirty
they can't
joke.
groan when I'm doing Ray Romano getting a blowjob.
Right.
Oh, Jesus, that's awesome.
No, and I had a joke that I did a long time ago, and I was working with Stephanie Peters, and she told me that. She said, if you ask them permission and they give you permission,
do it.
You'll be fine. But if you just do it without asking permission, it's this weird psychology where now they are okay to get mad at you.
They're on the hook. No, they're on the hook
but
if you ask for permission.
If you ask permission, they say okay.
Right.
It's all on them.
Yeah.
And it works. It actually works with the psychology with the audience.
Do you guys remember? Do you know Micah Sherman?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
great
Micah,
comedian. Great comedian.
He doesn't do stand up anymore.
Really?
But I'm gonna tell. Oh yeah, he does improv. He acts. He writes. He does a lot of stuff.
Right.
But he just stand up wasn't his favorite. Ultimately, he was so good at it. He was so funny.
Yes, he was. And actually, we had two friends of ours that was on the show, Ray Harrington and Derek Furtado.
Yep.
They produced a show that they wrote, and he was on it as a character. And he was hilarious on their show.
But see, that description reminds me of a Jonathan Groff.
Yes.
Who was
Jonathan
a great
Groff.
stand-up, but ended up going into writing, and now is like a writer in Hollywood. You know?
He's a showrunner.
Yeah, and a
Great
showrunner.
Yeah. So Micah used to have this joke. It's so fun. So there's two parts to it. The first part, he would just say, the bird, a swallow. There's a bird called a swallow.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's like, isn't it interesting that a swallow doesn't actually swallow? And then he's like, it's so weird that some animals are like named wrong. He's like a blowfish, terrible head, and and then
awesome.
There was maybe one or two other examples. Those are the ones that I remember.
Yeah.
And then he would say, now I'm trying to work on a version of that joke that I could do on TV to have it be cleaner.
Yeah.
So he's like, so let me try to run this clean version by you. He says, hey, have you ever noticed that a swallow doesn't actually help you? And then a blowfish, terrible at activities.
It makes no sense at all.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That's awesome.
So, it only works in the context of doing the full dirty version first.
The dirty version first, right, exactly.
Yes.
That's so funny.
Oh, yeah, he's the best.
So what have you been up to since the last time we talked to you? Obviously, are you on like a hiatus where you're not touring, or are you back on the road, or?
Thank you for asking. I don't remember the last time.
That was probably
it was
2
during
years
the
ago?
pandemic, 2020.
Wow.
Oh, sure. So, still just quarantining in place, just waiting, no.
Waiting for them to give you the go-ahead to go out.
Mike's a little slow to catch on with the rest of the world. And
Listen,
I do my own research, okay?
I don't know if you've heard this, but the pandemic's over. You can come out of your house. Don't wear a mask. That's fine.
I was waiting to come out on a podcast with Donald Trump, and so that he can let me know. Okay. So
Personal invitation to come out of your house. Absolutely.
So I, when after things started opening up, after vaccines were available, and it became less dangerous to be in public, I started traveling again, started touring again. I'm currently in Kansas City, where my
wow.
girlfriend's mom lives. We're staying, and my girlfriend's mom has 5 kids between the ages of 10 and 18. So we try to visit
Wow.
them a few times a year. And then when I'm out here, I do some shows. I'm doing some shows out here this weekend.
wow.
And the biggest thing that I have planned is in August in New York City. I will be taping my next comedy special.
Nice.
Wow.
And it is an hour of comedy that my girlfriend and I created together about our relationship. And we brought it to the Edinburgh Fringe Fest last year. And I actually started working on it. We were working on it since before the pandemic. So I recorded my last album that I probably talked about on your show.
Yeah.
That album's called A.K.A. I recorded that in 2019, and it came out in 2020.
Right before. Wow.
And and then so starting right after that in late 2019, by that point, I was working on, and we were working on this new hour, this new show. So it's been kind of, almost five-ish years in the making. In the meantime, I also recorded a couple other less thematic hours of comedy. I don't know if I mentioned, but I have a couple albums now. I've recorded 3 albums called Live In Between Albums, part 1, 2, and 3. And part 1 is available everywhere, streaming and such. Parts 2 and 3 right now are only exclusively on satellite radio, but they'll eventually also be available. Yeah, the third one that I just recorded in January in Minneapolis is called, the subtitle is Longer, Louder, Weirder. And it's really fun. 'Cause I started doing comedy, with just I wasn't Mike Birbiglia. I wasn't telling, one narrative story from beginning to end. I wasn't connecting everything. But over the course of years, over the past, 20 plus years, the hours of comedy that I'm really, proud of and happy with that I've been doing now, are about something. I'm working on one about my grandmother who died a few years ago. And my mom, who I started, talking to a lot more since my grandmother died, and another hour about toxic masculinity and my relationship to masculinity, that I'm really excited about. But also I write a lot of jokes that don't, necessarily fit a theme. And so I'm happy to every once in a while just, tour with an hour of jokes that are just fun to do. And then I'll record those, and I'm happy for people to be able to have all of them. And so, yes, I mean, basically, that's what I've been doing. I've been, touring, writing jokes, recording them, getting ready to record other ones. I wrote a book I wrote a lot of jokes, and my friend Ramin Nazer is an artist, and he illustrated. Every page is a joke of mine illustrated by him.
Very cool.
75, 80 pages, and it's called Heartbrain Art Train. And I'm I love, if you guys don't know Ramin Nazer, RAMINNAZER, follow him on Instagram, go to his website, and not just for my book, but for his books and his art. It's beautiful, it's colorful, it's philosophical. He's brilliant. And he's one of my favorite people to know and to follow and to get to work with. In fact, if you've seen my broccoli and ice cream,
I was going to ask
artwork,
you, he's the artist on it.
He did that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
that's and you know what? I got to say, I love his noodles too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You're such an ass.
I am an ass.
You're an ass.
I know. do you know there's the comedian Nick Vatterott is one of my favorites also. He is a good friend, and he wrote a joke once that was something he's I'm always getting these two things confused. I'm always confusing ramen numerals and Roman noodles,
That's funny. That's awesome.
That's great. And Mike, your website?
So MyqKaplan.com and Myq Kaplan on social media, all spelled the weird way I spell it, MyqKaplan. Put that in
Perfect.
everywhere. My what is it? My newsletter. Yeah, the newsletter that we
newsletter.
started out talking about, the Alpha and the Omega, is MyqKaplan.substack.com. And yeah, come see my shows. Listen,
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of albums on your various platforms. And
I'm just amazed
And
at the fact that when you don't have a day job, well, you don't now, but I still do.
Thanks for rubbing
But when
that
you
in.
when you don't have a day job, they have to worry about how much comedy you can write. Like he's talking about, oh yeah, then I had an hour of this and an hour on that and an hour. I'm still doing fucking
It is amazing.
WPRO jokes from 30 years ago. You know?
Since I got fired, I've been doing a lot of writing.
well,
resume.
No, not my resume. I
No,
said, fuck it. Let me go with this comedy
I'm
thing.
kidding.
So I've been writing a lot of jokes lately because maybe that's where I'm gonna go for the
Dude, it only happened yesterday. What the fuck?
Ace.
You already writing?
That's really funny.
I
And
wrote 3
also,
new jokes since yesterday. You fucker.
One thing you don't have to worry about probably is healthcare. So that is something
No,
that I do
that's
spend
right.
some
Yeah,
time.
the guy has great health care for $200 a month.
Yeah, I know.
Meanwhile, I
can't
gotta,
complain.
I gotta pay $2,500 for a new cap on one tooth.
All right.
Wow.
All right.
I was the past several days waiting to hear back from the periodontist to find out if the dental insurance that I did pay for, they're like, oh
Covers.
yeah, that's just like a joke, you know?
Yeah.
That's nobody covers this.
Yeah, of course.
We don't cover that.
No, we don't cover major
we-
things like
Yeah.
your teeth.
Anything unnecessary. Oh yeah.
We'll cover the cleanings.
Yeah.
We'll cover cleanings
We-
and some cavity fillings.
We
but
co-
anything beyond that, don't ask.
We cover the things you never need.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The things you do need, we don't cover that.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, we don't do a root canal. We would do the Panama Canal if you need
Yeah.
that, but you don't need that. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well said. But
Dear
for our
Prudence,
listeners,
help me. Yes.
Dear Prudence, help me with my
perfect.
teeth.
What a great way to wrap that up.
That's
But
awesome.
For our, all of our listeners, go to the show notes, and Mike's website will be there. His
Yeah.
links will be there. Check him out. Mike, like I said before, not only one of my favorite comedians, but definitely one of my favorite people on
Yeah.
the planet Earth. He is a great guy, absolutely hilarious comedian. You got to check him out.
I really appreciate it, and I feel the same way. You are two of my favorite comedians and people on this flat earth. Thank you so much.
Oh, son of a bitch.
Wow.
This
That's
will
a
never
great
see the light of day.
No.
This will never see the light of day, you bastard.
No, I think that should be the title of the podcast. Myq Kaplan, The Earth is Flat. That'll get some listens.
Oh, Mike, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's great to see you again, man.
The same.
I definitely want to see you again soon, so thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks,
I hope
man.
so.
And have some good shows in Kansas City. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
enjoy.
appreciate it.
Enjoy.
Thanks.
You too.
And that's it. Yeah. Awesome, man. We can't
Cool.
thank you
Always.
enough. This was
Thank
so
you.
much fun.
So fun. Glad
and
we could do it.
I am away, but he'll come up to the studio that night, right?
I'll hope to see
I
you.
would like.
Yeah.
You said June 26th, right?
It's a
That's right.
Wednesday night. Yeah.
Yeah.
I literally fly back the next day. That sucks.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in my calendar. I should be around, and I would love to come up and see you, Mike.
That'd be
Cool.
awesome.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. And if you're not there, I understand. But I mean,
But
I
you'll
listen to
hold
your
it against
podcast all the time.
What's your favorite episode?
Yeah, who are your
this
favorite
one.
guests?
It's the one, yeah. No, it's the one. It's the one where you do Trump and Gilbert Gottfried and
My favorite episodes are when Ace does impressions.
yeah, which is pretty much every week he baits me into impressions somehow.
Oh, Mike, thank you so much,
Well,
man.
thank
I love
y'all.
you, buddy.
You're the best. Love
Thank you, man.
Thank
Have
you. Talk to you later.
Have a good night, man.
You too. Bye.